My tip for people looking to scale is learn about your customer, identify which areas are important to them and which areas aren't, right? There's always going to be something in the customer experience that your customers don't give a hoot about. And those are the areas where you can deprioritize focus.
You're listening to CX Passport, the show about creating great customer experiences with a dash of travel talk. Each episode, we'll talk with our guests about great CX, travel, and just like the best journeys, explore new directions we never anticipated. I'm your host, Rick Denton. I believe the best meals are served outside and require a passport. Let's get going. When I write intros for guests, I like to combine a little bit of what they've shared with me during a pre-show call and some elements of their public digital trail. It's fun to see what's out there. It's even more fun when a guest comes up with a very unique way to describe who they are and what they do. Today's guest, Mercer Smith, Vice President, Customer Experience, Insights, and Community at Partner Hero, tells us on LinkedIn that she talks about creating your customer experience from scratch. Okay, that's cool. I'm curious about how that happens. Oh, wait, there's one more line. I build and scale customer-facing teams that give a shit and can help you do the same. Whoa! Now that's a tagline. What I've come to know about Mercer, and as I've seen her content on LinkedIn and interacted with her, this isn't just a tagline. This isn't branding fluffernutter. She really cares about getting that right. And she really cares about you getting that right. Mercer comes to us today from a town you've heard me rave about before in the show, Austin, Texas. It's where I grew up. I love the city. It's a wonderful place. Having, in her words, transitioned from being a barista to working in customer experience 15 years ago, life has not been the same for her since. With a wealth of experience building teams and supporting success, Mercer finds her energy in being a connector, building community, creating peer groups, which is the focus of her role today. Folks, there's also a master's in creative nonfiction writing in Mercer's background. I imagine many of you have seen her content for Help Scout and HubSpot. If not, get out there and consume it. She's got great wisdom to share. Looking forward to this show. Mercer, welcome to CX Passport.
Thanks so much for having me, Rick. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, this is going to be fun. I'm excited about it, of course. Let's start with that key word in your title, community. A community can be this absolutely rich source of development. Customer experience world's no different. And I know you've built a ton of experience in your world. How are you using communities, this key part of who you are now in your role, to advance the overall betterment of customer experience across all CX roles?
Yeah, so I think in CX especially, we have, a lot of thought leadership. There's a lot of great people with great things to say. And I find that they actually become bottlenecks, right? Like people who are just starting out in CX think that they need to talk to one of these people in order to get better at their role.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so I think, yeah, and so I think the key thing that I'm focusing on, especially in communities, is connecting these people together because they actually have much more wisdom than they think they do, right? So for a long time, I was doing mentorship and I would talk one-on-one with people and they could kind of come and talk to the duck with me about whatever they were thinking about. And I found that as I removed myself as that bottleneck and gave them the space to talk to each other, they were actually doing a lot more elevating and a lot more growing than they would have been just speaking to someone one-on-one. I think that's the best opportunity that we have in communities right now. We talk about the separation between support and success and experience and people working in UX and what UX versus CX and all of that. And I think the more you can get people together and get them talking, the better elevated everyone is across the board. So that's I think where I'm focusing on with communities is trying to do more elevation of the individual contributors and community members rather than the people doing community leadership.
That's, I had never thought of that in that way of the CX leader, the one that's man, I hate this term, but influencer, the thought leader that's out there, all those bad cliches that exist as being a bottleneck. I hadn't thought of it in that way. The idea of using communities to help open that up and improve how people develop and how they grow. I hadn't really thought of that. Now, one of the things about communities, though, and I've been a part of several, and there's a whole spectrum, right? There's the great, engaged community that's a lot of people are contributing and being a part of. And then there's the meh, right? We signed up for the community. We checked the box because there was a lot of excitement at the beginning, but then there's no participation. There's limited value. So how are you tactically, as a community builder, really trying to prevent that outcome and creating that thriving, sharing community that you described earlier?
Yeah, so I think, that's tricky for everyone, right? Like, because it's really about the members. Honestly, there's nothing that as a community builder I can do to like get people into the community and get them talking, right? Like
Right.
I can't drag them there. You can only like, you can create the space. And I
Right.
think the best thing that I'm trying to consider right now is like, what are the different platforms for, right? So total transparency. I have a community on Discord where people are talking. It's my CXL peer group. They're on Discord. And I was like, we need somewhere different to go. We need somewhere better that's more structured than Discord, that's more professional than this like tool that people use for gaming effectively. So I created a circle. And, I'm discovering that less chatter is happening on the circle. More chatter is still happening in Discord. And maybe the different platforms are actually better for different things, right? So I think, we assume that for a community to be thriving, there needs to be a lot of conversation. And I don't necessarily know that that's true. I'm reevaluating that, I guess, is what I'm saying. In some spaces, I think it's okay to just have long-standing evergreen content, right? So like one of the spaces we have in the Circle community is resources for people who are hunting for jobs. So like people have put together things like resume review or top tips for interviews and things like that. And that's kind of evergreen content that people can find and use. It's still helpful. It's not an ongoing conversation, though things
Right.
do get added every once in a while. And so I think there's still community to be made around that. I would urge, and this is not just selfishly like to think that my community is still thriving, right? But I would urge us to reconsider like what community looks like and how the different components of a community can pull together to create that thriving whole.
This is your captain speaking. I want to thank you for listening to CX Passport today. We've now reached our cruising altitude, so I'll turn that seatbelt sign off. While you're getting comfortable, hit that follow or subscribe button on your favorite podcast app so you'll never miss an episode. Love it if you'd tell a friend about CX Passport, leave a review so others can discover the show as well. Now, sit back and enjoy the rest of the episode.
Boy, and I'm actually, my brain's a little frozen for a second here as I absorb that, because I know going into this conversation, my vision of community is well, whether the former or the latter, I can't remember, but the one that is that if you just counted comments, oh my gosh, there's a ton of people engaged today, and there's firing information back and forth, and what that looks like. But then as I think to some of the resources, I think that's why I would think of it differently, or have thought of it differently. Let me use that. You're changing my mind. And that is, I would have thought of it as resources or something like that. But resources can be a community of itself, that we've got this space that is a place that you can go and find your job hunting tips. But then you can also have this engaging conversation around this problem that I had in the middle of a job search, this active issue that I have, and be able to have that be a part of the community. I hadn't thought of that spectrum. You know what it sounds like you're doing, Mercer? It sounds like what you're doing is you're listening to your customer and then acting on what they want to do. Kind of the principles of customer experience, what you described, going from barista to customer experience.
Yeah. Yeah, I think resources can be cultivated by a community, and in that case, they're still a part of the community, right? So I think we're going to see a shift in what that might look like as communities become more expansive. There might be a shift away from like the typical like message board, comments back and forth measure of engagement, and like what kind of meaningful things are being produced by the community as a part of success.
Right. I'm using such a data word with resources, but that I have what's being created, what is the content, what's new, the community itself, the creation of that community, more so than even the discussion back and forth, can be an element of community. Ooh, I like that. Oh, gosh, we could spend all that there, but I want to take you into that customer experience world a little bit here. And so I know I talk a lot about on CX Passport and my YouTube channel Shorts. I've got a lot of energy focused on the front line, and I know the front line means a lot to you. It is the epicenter of customer insights, or I believe it is, or rather could be if the company paid attention to them, right? So I know that a lot of companies they fail to pay attention to that rich source. So I'm curious, knowing that you care about that too, how can we better elevate the insights that the frontline provides?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of this falls to the company as a whole, and some of it falls to the frontline team, right?
Okay.
I think something I get asked about this a lot from frontline teams, like, how can I do this? How do I get people to care? And a lot of it is speaking the same language, right? So you can say like, oh, we got like 9 million tickets about this issue and customers really want it. Nobody understands what that means if they don't work on some kind of customer facing team, right? Like
Right.
your engineering team doesn't have any context for what 9 million tickets means.
Right.
I mean, it sounds like a lot, but you get what I'm saying,
Right.
I think.
Is that a lot? Is it a little? Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
no
like
idea.
in the grand scheme of things, like if you get, like I say this to my son all the time. He's like, is 2 a lot? And I'm like, well, 2 Tyrannosaurus Rexes is a lot. 2 pennies, not so much. So you need to have some kind of context to understand the size and scope of this issue. And so I think for the frontline team, being able to translate the stuff that they're talking about into the language of the people that they're trying to meet, right? So in engineering, like you could say something like, oh, we're having 18 customers that are not able to do this specific task because there's a bug in the product. And that's out of 100 customers, or, something like that. Give them some kind of context for what it is that you're talking about. And I think the reason that a lot of companies, or many companies, when they're just starting out, assume that there aren't any insights in the frontline support organization or frontline customer-facing organization is because they don't have the context or the language to understand what it means. So I think that's the big first step, is making sure that the frontline team has the language to communicate that and is using it in an effective way. Beyond that, I think, we see this issue definitely on the smaller side of things, right? When teams are just getting started. Mm-hmm. But we also see it in these like massive organizations that assume that they already know what their customers want. They assume that they already know what's going on. And so these insights kind of take a back seat, right?
Yeah.
And I think the same advice goes for them, right? Like being able to understand the scope of these issues and not necessarily just looking at size, but looking at pain, right? So I think there are 2 ways to look at customer issues. One of them is, as I said, like the frequency, the level of frequency,
right,
how often it's happening, and the amount of pain that it causes. And I think that on the larger side of things, for these like enterprise businesses that are no longer viewing customer support or frontline support as a methodology for understanding your customer better, it's thinking about that pain rather than the frequency, because there's so much signal to noise at that scale. I think it's just a matter of reframing.
That idea of pain and the signal to noise aspect of it, so true. And I think there's even a next step further, and the frontline really helps with this as well. And that is, okay, and also what is the business impact of that frequency? If it happens a ton and there's not a lot of pain and there's no business impact, well then, okay, maybe that's not where we focus, as opposed to it happened twice. It was incredibly painful, and it cost the company X dollars, or the inefficiency, or whatever the results are. And so that focus on the business result aspect of it can be so focused. Such a focus there, and how getting that right. You know why I was stumbling there? Because I was actually thinking about your 2 T-Rexes and 2 pennies. Like what a brilliant! How big is 2? Well, I don't know. Is it a T-Rex or is it a penny? What a brilliant! And I think that beyond just the application of your son, it's so true in the customer experience world and everything else. Is it a T-Rex or is it a penny? You may have given us the title of the show, actually, Mercer. We'll see how this episode goes out. Let's stay in that frontline space for a little bit. It is no secret that is one of the most challenging roles. Whether it's a contact center with a headset on, or it's a retail employee or a restaurant server or anything like that, if that front line, that closest contact to the customer, is overlooked, it's under-resourced, it's overworked, mental health becomes a factor. I want to talk about mental health a little bit here. How can companies, how should they be caring for their front line? If they're the rich source of insights and they're the co-delivery of great customer experience with the customer, how can a company protect the front line from giving away just everything of themselves?
Yeah. Something that I feel really passionate about is giving support folks or frontline folks the opportunity to work on things outside of the queue, right? So this comes back to them just having really great insights, right? Your frontline folks know your customers better than anybody else. They also know what they need and what they want better than anybody else. So giving them the freedom to level themselves up and work on projects that are like passion projects for them can be a huge benefit both for your team's like mental health and brain space, but also for your customers, right? Like some really cool stuff can come out of that. You could get really great automation, you could get new resources and documentation, you could try some new experiments in terms of like pathing in your product. Like these are all things that I've seen come out of this out of the queue stuff that I think is really valuable. And then beyond that, like ensuring that the people that are leading these frontline teams have the language to speak to mental wellness, right? I think a lot of people are not necessarily comfortable speaking about burnout, speaking about anxiety, speaking about their own personal struggles. And I feel like that's a really key component to anyone in leadership in the customer facing space. You need to be able to speak to those things because it's the best way to reach the people on your team that may be struggling with it.
Mercer, I think that's so important. I love that focus and the idea of giving language so that whether it's frontline or any human, right? Any human has the ability to speak to those that can and find that support. Now, I realize that the first class lounge is a little bit more trivial than actual mental health, but there is a moment of if you're in travel or you're really busy, it can be nice to just take that respite. And so I'd love for you to join me here in the first class lounge. We're going to move quickly, but we're going to have a little bit of fun too. What is a dream travel location from your past?
Chef Chouen in Morocco.
Okay. You see my eyes. You see that I know Morocco. Tell me more about Chef Chouen. Did I get that
Chef
right?
Chef Chouen, yes.
Chouen, okay.
Yes.
Tell me more.
It is an entirely blue city. So all of the walls are blue, all the houses are blue, everything is blue. It's built into a mountainside. It's very, very beautiful. There are tons and tons of cats, which I really love. Moroccan food is excellent. It's very peaceful, and I loved it. I went there a few years ago.
Oh my gosh, you hit me on all sorts of fronts of happiness there. And I think now that I didn't know the name, but I think I've seen the pictures of it. My daughter introduced our family. We were a dog family, but introduced us to cats. And I actually have been to a cat cafe now. So now your city that you're describing here in Morocco, I think I want to go there. Good. Now you gave me a new one for my list. Well, let's talk about your list. A dream travel location you've not been to yet.
Berlin.
Okay.
I would love to go to Berlin. I've never been to Berlin. I have never been to Germany. I was supposed to go right before the pandemic hit for Oktoberfest. I didn't get a chance to go. Berlin is a really beautiful, artsy city, and there's a lot of history there.
So clearly plenty of history, and it does seem to have this, quirky is the wrong word, avant-garde is a little too overused, but sort of forward-looking, edgy type arts and culture to it that inspires, and I think it would be a fun place to head. You mentioned Oktoberfest. That's associated primarily with beer, but there's a lot of German food to be had as well. So let's talk about food for a bit. What is a favorite thing of yours to eat?
I really love Indian food. Mm-hmm. That's probably one of my favorite foods to eat. I also cook a lot though, and I can't really cook Indian food. So
it's nice to have somebody else do that for us.
Yes. yes.
There are things that I cook well. Not many, but there are things that I cook well, and I am thankful for all of the other people who know how to cook and enjoy that. So, Mercer, let's talk about the other direction, though. What is a thing your parents forced you to eat but you hated as a kid?
Honestly, I've been thinking about this, and I cannot think of anything.
Wow.
I will say, I mean, my parents always made me eat just basically everything. Like, I had, like, uni at the age of 6, and I've just kind of been eating a lot of weird stuff my whole life. My grandmother did make me eat sweetbreads, like the veal glands, when I was, like, 7, and that was not a favorite of mine, but I didn't hate it. I don't really use the word hate. And I love food of all kinds, so I always have.
Well, Mercer, I've gotten to that point in my life now where I feel the same way as you, that I'll try anything, I'll eat anything. But there were some things that I didn't like so much, although my mom was a huge fan of sweetbreads. And so those were introduced to us early on and very infrequently. It's a bit of a delicacy, but yes, it is interesting to hear that at least you tried them. And
Yes.
kudos to you. All right.
Thank you.
Let's go back to travel. What is one item, not including your phone, not including your passport, that you will not leave home without?
I was going to say my children, but they're not really an item. Probably a book.
Mercer, I'm still laughing. That's awesome. My kids are not an item. Now, I will say this. There are times that my kids, I've felt like they're an item, and they're an item that needs to just, no, you're not coming with me on this trip because I just, no. So
Yes.
I believe mine are a little older. Mine are senior in high school, university age, and so I've had plenty of moments where, yeah, they were an item. But wonderful kids. Love them. They're great. But I love that. So we will count it as a book that you will not leave home without, even though you're bringing your kids on your trip. So let's go back to that great LinkedIn line. And now I'm going to avoid having to use another bleep here so they don't have to put the explicit flag on my episode, but let's focus on that scale customer-facing team section. How do you go about that? Scaling is such a challenging thing, right? The idea is great at the beginning, but how does it get big? So as your team has grown, how have you managed that scalability and what they seek to deliver?
It's actually been different at each team that I've had to scale. So my shtick has been going to companies starting at 0 or 1 employees and scaling up to usually between 20 and 50. And the scale is different everywhere. And I think the common mistake is that we try to speak to scale as if it's the same thing for everybody, right? We're like, oh, how do you scale? People are like, oh, use automation, use bots, do this. And yeah, sure, that works, I guess, but it's not the best way to do it. So my tip for people looking to scale is learn about your customer, identify which areas are important to them and which areas aren't, right? There's always going to be something in the customer experience that your customers don't give a hoot about. And those are the areas where you can deprioritize focus, right? So for example, at Trello, we had 6 support team members for 15 million customers, or users, I should say, because Trello is a freemium product. The way that we scaled that effectively is by having excellent documentation, right? We knew that the people that were coming through wanted to find answers for themselves. They didn't want to wait in support. They didn't want to talk to support because they were free users for this free product that's fairly lightweight. So that was our methodology there. Focus on self-service, focus on tools to make self-service accessible. Later on, when I was at Venafi, the strategy is different, right? They're very high touch. It's a security company. People are expecting different things. So with that, the scale came through by focusing on processes, right? How do we make processes repeatable? How do we make templates? How do we make this very, very high touch customer success strategy repeatable in order for us to be able to scale. So if you look at those two different strategies, you wouldn't have been able to just kind of map one onto the other. You really have to know the customer and know what they care about. So that's the key nugget that I will give away in regards to the easiest and best way to scale.
It fits everything you said at the very beginning, right? Where you were talking about your community and understanding your community and designing it in such a way we're going to be on Discord or we're going to try circles. We're going to do whatever the platform needs, to be what the customer is driving you to do. And I think that's something that gets lost in that scale so often. I love that you focused on that because you're right. The knee-jerk reaction is automate bots. And then those of us on the customer side get pissed off at the automation and the bots when we're trying to solve a particular need that, great. If I wanted to ask you my account balance, which I don't know why we keep using that answer. How many people ask for their account balance? But anyway, so I want something basic. Right? Yeah, I want a bot. I want to book a reservation at a restaurant. I want an automated solution. But you know what? If my flight's canceled and I'm stuck in Tampa for 4 days, I would like to talk to someone. And so that idea of scaling, understanding what your customer's need is and understanding what they are seeking, driving that solution, such a twist on what I normally hear when I ask people about that scaling part of it.
I would say, in regards to that, people talking like your flight to Tampa gets canceled and you're stuck in an airport for 4 days. Like you can also scale that. Like there is a way to scale that and have it scale in a way that meets the customer's needs.
Right.
And I think the thing to remember is that you can scale anything. Like, and if you really want that like touch, that like deep human connection, you can also scale that. It just means that there's something else somewhere else that needs to be deprioritized or shifted or done in a different way so that you can free up the resources that are being used there to help
Yeah.
scale this efficiently.
Love that. And that's such an important discussion in business. Trade-offs. We like to talk about things as being good or bad, but frequently in business, it's just a trade-off. That path A means I can do less of path B. That's not good or bad. It's just a trade-off that I need to choose between in many cases.
Right.
Mercer, you talked about this actually earlier on, and I was thinking about it as you said it. I wanted to go back to it, though. And I don't like this tribalism that exists in the customer experience world. We see it a lot of times where people want to talk about, what is the definition of customer success or versus service or experience or UX. I get fatigued with these definitional focus on labels. Ultimately, all of us are just trying to create something great for the customer. So in your community, in your content, in your job, how are you bridging the gap between all of those worlds?
Yeah, I think the way that I'm bridging the gap is just by being increasingly stubborn about not using those definitions. um, so I see, like, for instance, my peer group that I have, right? There's like 150 members. We meet up once a month. And inevitably, every time that someone finds out about it, they're like, well, is this for customer success folks? Is this for support folks? Like, who is this for? And I am like, it's for everyone.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, do you break people up in success and support separate? And I'm like, no, I don't. Everyone is in their like randomized peer groups because that's going to be the best way to learn. Support folks have stuff to learn from customer success folks. Customer success folks have something to learn from customer experience folks. And also, like, sometimes the definitions overlap. Like, there are some companies that call frontline support people customer success. Like, there is no way to use this definition and have it be meaningful. So let's just not use it in the context of these peer groups.
I love the idea of stubbornness as being the solution to that. It's rare that we get an answer that, you know how I solved that problem? Stubbornness. And I love that. It's so true, though. And that's why I use the term fatigue. I'm just tired of it. And I like that approach. And you're right. I mean, I've a fellow CXer that's out there, Nicholas Zeisler, has talked about this a lot. Go out there and just look for customer experience jobs. And look at the difference in job descriptions based off the same title. None of us know what the definition is. It's impossible to define, or even if it is possible to find, the value of finding some purest definition is worthless when really what we're all trying to do is just create something great for the customer. So I applaud you in your stubbornness and support you in that, and will use that. You've given me something new to use. Yeah, Mercer, I want to look forward, and I think we're getting close to the end of our time here, which is unfortunate because I'm laughing with you and would like to keep this going a lot longer. But I'm curious, in your team today, what's next? What's next for you and your team? What are kind of the challenges that you're looking at and the opportunities that you're seeing clients needing to solve now?
Yeah, that's a great question. For me, I mean, I'm trying to create this one-stop shop for businesses that want to provide amazing CX. So I want to be able to offer, we select your tools for you, we maintain your tools for you, we staff your teams for you, we manage their performance, we tell you what metrics to look at. I want businesses that really want to do good CX, but understand that they don't necessarily have either the cycles or the expertise to do it as well as they want to come to us and us to be able to provide that. I think the biggest opportunity that we're currently seeing, which I feel sad to say, but is AI, right? Everyone's talking about AI. I don't want to be yet another person talking about it. But I think that that's a big frontier, right? Is like, how do we implement AI? I know that we can't just set it and forget it, right? Like that's not a way to do it. So how do we manage that for our customers? How do we implement it in a way that feels authentic to these businesses? Because I think, we're seeing this thought that like AI can replace customer support folks, or AI can replace your low-level marketing people. AI can replace this, AI can replace that. And I don't think that's true. So identifying what the actual need is for each of these companies rather than taking a blanket approach, and then helping them to craft an AI strategy that feels authentic and feels supportive to them rather than a method of replacement, is kind of our biggest challenge that we're trying to tackle right now.
I am not surprised to hear AI come up in that conversation and that question, but I am absolutely delighted to hear the approach that you're describing, that it is not this just automatic, drop it in, forget about it, everybody can be fired because we can just type in a question. Interesting debate discussion on LinkedIn a few days ago around, are travel agents going to be gone? Now, travel agents as an industry have started to decline anyway, but will this eliminate them? And the answer is no. It'll eliminate anybody saying, hey, can you book me a flight? But when it comes to a complex and a human, I want to know what the richness of experiences that are available to me in Morocco, right? That's not going to come from an AI solution. And whether that's travel agency or whether it's software as a service or whatever the thing is that is being considered for AI, I really appreciate your approach to saying, hey, it's not the automatic. Let's dig into this and really understand what's right for the customer and be able to deliver that. Mercer, I've enjoyed the heck. Clearly, I've laughed a ton on this episode. I've learned a lot from you. I've definitely really come to appreciate your approach to communities. I've come to certainly grow in my appreciation on your approach to customer experience, and I'm glad that you and I both share that fatigue of the tribalism, and now I'm adding stubbornness as a key criteria for me in that regard of saying, nope, we're not going to do this. And man alive, I will never, ever forget about the is too big. Mercer, if folks want to know a little bit more about your approach, get some insight that I gained on this episode, but get a little sense of getting deeper with you and understanding your approach, Partner Heroes approach, all that, what's the best way for someone to get in touch with you and learn more?
Sure. I'm on LinkedIn, Mercer Smith. And then otherwise, you can find me anywhere on the internet with Mercenator, which I think Rick will include in the notes here. My website is Mercenator, and I'm Mercenator on all social media channels.
Awesome. I will get all of that in the show notes. Scroll down, click, connect with Mercer. You're going to have a brilliant customer experience conversation. At the very least, be out there reading her content and engage with her there. There's a lot of wisdom that she's sharing out there and in the various worlds out there. Mercer, really appreciated you being on the show. Thank you for being on CX Passport.
Thanks for having me, Rick.
Thanks for joining us this week on CX Passport. If you like today's episode, I have 3 quick next steps for you. Click subscribe on the CX Passport YouTube channel or your favorite podcast app. Next, leave a comment below the video or a review in your favorite podcast app so others can find and enjoy CX Passport too. Then head over to cxpassport.com for show notes and resources that can help you create tangible business results by delivering great customer experience. Until next time, I'm Rick Denton, and I believe the best meals are served outside and require a passport.